All right, we're going to give it a couple more minutes and then we'll get started.
Hello, this is Susan.
Hello. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
So very quickly, going to give some instructions for our Spanish speakers. Muy buenas tardes a todos. Gracias por estar aquí con nosotros el día de hoy. Rápidamente, si buscan escuchar esta presentación en español, por favor, háganle clic al botón que se enseña abajo. Es un icono de un globo y pueden escuchar toda la presentación del día de hoy en español si escogen el canal de español. Si tienen alguna pregunta, por favor, no duden en ponerlo en el chat. All right, everyone, once again, thank you so much for being here today. My name is Sarah E. I am Parent University Coordinator of Network 4, and welcome to another face-to-face session. Today we have our health and wellness session, Salud de Bienestar, with face-to-face programming. So before we get started, just a couple of things to note. This session will be recorded. We want to make sure we're able to share this knowledge with parents who are unable to be here with us today. All previous sessions along with this one can be found in our YouTube channel, and I'll make sure to put that link in the chat a little later on during our session. Today, we're going to have a presentation followed by a conversation with our friend Lauren. The chat and Q&A will be open throughout the meeting to allow all of us to ask our questions. Just please keep in mind, we may not be able to get through all questions today, but we will sure try. Please make sure to mute your mic, be respectful with your comments, be brief when sharing, and then also to sign up for our newsletter. And I'll make sure to put that link in the chat as well. So please join us for our following sessions. On Monday, the 13th, we have SEL in English. And so we're going to go over mental health trends among children and adolescents. On Tuesday, the 14th, we have a CPS FACE volunteer application process, and that's going to be a bilingual session. On Wednesday, the 15th, we have a parent training from 10 to 11:30, and that's going to be in English. And then in the afternoon session, we have Isaac from 4 to 5. That's a preparing for college session, and also in English. And then Thursday, we have Ask the Expert, which is a bilingual session. Once again, everyone, thank you so much for being here with us today. I'm very excited for this topic. Lauren, thank you so much for being here and giving us this wonderful information. Today in Face-to-Face, we have our health and wellness session talking about mental health policy discussion. So Lauren, once again, thank you so much for coming today and giving our parents this great information. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Sure. Thanks so much. Hi, everyone. My name is Lauren Pett. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Whole Child and Health Policy Program Manager for the Office of Student Health and Wellness. In my role, I oversee the development and revision of all of our many health and wellness related policies, which if you're familiar with our office, you know is a lot. We have very many policies related to everything from chronic conditions management, administration of medication, sexual health education, nutrition, things like that. And everything that we do is aligned to that CPS whole child core value. And so my team really oversees the strategy and implementation related to that work.
Awesome.
That's it. That's all about me, I guess.
That's great. That's great. We want to get to know you, Lauren. That's great. Thank you so much. And then I'll stop sharing and then I'm going to share your presentation. Before that, quick patience from everyone. I'm just going to give one more instruction to our Spanish speakers to make sure we're all able to have the presentation today. Rápidamente, si gustan escuchar esta presentación en español, por favor, háganle clic al icono de globo que está en la parte inferior de su pantalla y escojan la interpretación al español y pueden escuchar la presentación del día de hoy al español. Si gustan hacer preguntas, no duden en dejarlos en el chat o el Q&A y igual las presentamos durante la junta y pueden escuchar sus respuestas en la sección de interpretación. Muchas gracias. And let me pull up the presentation 1 second. Perfect. Whenever you get started.
muted myself. All right, can you all hear me now? Okay, great. All right, thanks so much. So I want to thank everyone for being here today. What we're going to be talking about is a new mental health and suicide prevention policy that the Office of Student Health and Wellness has been working on for quite some time. Can you go to the next slide? Great. So just to let you all know in advance, I'm going to be doing a lot of talking and a lot of reading. And this is really because what I want to do today is try to share some of the content of the policy that we've been working on. And this is really the best way that I can do it to accommodate anyone who needs this information in Spanish, the fact that we have the interpreter available. So by the end of this, I hope this will be kind of a short presentation. And by the end of it, I'm sure you will all be very sick of hearing my voice, but I really do just want to get this information out to you as much as possible. So just to start, the mission of the Office of Student Health and Wellness is to remove health-related barriers to learning and advance health equity in Chicago. Next slide. And this is just the setup of our office. We have 6 teams within our office, and each team is responsible for a different segment of work. I am on the health promotion team, so we do everything related to policy creation and implementation, school food, mental health, sexual health education. And then the other teams cover things like data and research, direct health services, Medicaid and SNAP, and the use of social service benefits. Obviously now we also have the COVID response team, which does everything from contact tracing and COVID testing, things like that. And then we also have the nursing team as part of our office now as well. Next slide. Everything that we do in our office falls under this umbrella of supporting the whole child. And that's because CPS is committed to ensuring that every student in every school is healthy, safe, supported, challenged, and engaged. And we do this by using a holistic approach that connects physical, mental, and social emotional health with academic success. The reason we do this is to ensure that students' basic needs are being met and that every student has the supports they need to learn and thrive. And we do this through collaboration between central office, schools, and the community, guided by the whole school, whole community, whole child framework, which is also referred to as WISC. It's WSCC, but it's pronounced whisk, like a whisk. And that's the image that you see on the right. That is the WISC framework. Next slide, please. So this session aligns to the social emotional climate, counseling, psychological and social services, and health services components of the WISC framework. Next slide, please. And as I mentioned, this presentation will address a forthcoming comprehensive mental health and suicide prevention policy and will inform you all on the proposed policy language, as well as give you an opportunity to ask questions and provide feedback. Next slide, please. So this is the policy timeline. You can see that orange arrow is where we are right now in this process. So we've been working on this policy since around October of 2020. The initial focus was just on suicide prevention and awareness, but we decided to expand that to include general mental health, awareness and issues. We are currently wrapping up the stakeholder engagement and equity review piece of all of this work. The next step is to post the policy for public comments, which I will talk about at the end of this presentation. And the policy will go to board in March of 2022. Next slide, please. So the main focus of the policy is to help schools create safe and supportive environments where students feel comfortable talking about mental health and where they know where to get help when they need it. It's guided by Anne Marie's Law, which is a state law that requires school districts to adopt a policy addressing suicide prevention, awareness, and education, including training requirements and methods of response and intervention. This policy is part of a larger body of mental health, whole child focused work. And that includes things like the Healing Centered Project, which I know we have presented on in this group before last spring. We also have a mental health framework, as well as many other mental health focused initiatives. And we really considered equity when writing this policy, specifically how our Black, Latinx, and LGBTQ plus students are impacted. Next slide, please. So we want to ensure that this policy meets the needs of the CPS community. And we know that the need for healing is particularly acute right now. The two charts on the left of this slide are from the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. And so we can see by looking at that the rates of high school students who at some point felt sad or hopeless, which is the chart on the far left side, that rate has been increasing since 2005. The chart on the right, which is the percentage of high school students who seriously considered attempting suicide, indicates a slight decrease from 2017 to 2019, but overall the rate is still much higher than we would like for it to be. And we know from that Youth Risk Behavior Survey that, as I mentioned, our Black, Latinx, and LGBTQ students are significantly more impacted by all of this. Their rates of depression and anxiety and suicidal behavior are much higher than their other classmates. And then additionally, between the impact of COVID-19, the ongoing issues with gun violence in the city, and the recent spotlight on racial injustice, our students need support and time and space to heal from these numerous traumas. Next slide, please. So the policy is broken down into sections, which can be seen here. And those sections are a whole child approach to mental health and the root causes of mental health, responsibilities and oversight, awareness, prevention, and education, methods of intervention and response, reporting procedures, student absences, grades, and disciplinary actions, training, and resources. And the sections that have the stars by them, those are all required by Anne Marie's Law, which is that state law that I mentioned earlier. So I will provide more information on some of these sections, but in the interest of time, we'll not go into detail on all of them. Next slide. So this first section is the whole child approach to mental health. And so what this does is this really connects this whole policy to that whole child WISC framework that I mentioned at the beginning. So it connects specifically mental health to that whole child framework, ensures collaboration among central office departments, specifically the departments that oversee school counselors, nurses, psychologists, social workers, as those are the folks who are really delivering interventions for students who need that one-on-one, really specialized support, as well as social emotional learning specialists who help schools create these universal social emotional climates in schools, and then crisis staff. This section also requires the Office of Student Health and Wellness to establish and maintain a mental health governance council that will be an interdepartmental group whose responsibility is to provide ongoing oversight and review of all mental health related activities in the district. And then it identifies and acknowledges the root causes of mental health issues and ensures that related policies and protocols are being followed to address things like food insecurity, housing instability, and chronic conditions. We know that these three things can really impact a student's mental health. And so we want to look at what are the existing programs and policies throughout CPS. So things like making sure that students have access to nutritious food in schools, making sure that our students who are experiencing homelessness have the support that they need, and making sure that our students with chronic conditions are receiving the proper treatment in schools. So basically, we're just connecting existing policies to this issue of mental health. Next slide. Section 2 is responsibilities and oversight. This section assigns responsibility for implementation to the Chief Health Officer. So that's Dr. Fox. He oversees the Office of Student Health and Wellness, but also assigns responsibility to the leaders of related departments. So again, the departments that oversee counselors, nurses, social workers, social emotional learning specialists. We're actually writing into the policy that all of these departments have to work together. The other big thing in this section is it requires all schools to establish a behavioral health team, or BHT. This is a school-based team that will be established by the principal that's responsible for delivering tier 2 and 3 interventions. So those are things where, individual students or smaller groups of students need more specialized support around mental health. So the BHT assesses and refers students to interventions or other services as needed. And these teams are composed of administrators, school counselors, social workers, psychologists, SEL coordinators, and nurses. This is something that many schools have a BHT, and we've really been working over the last couple of years to ensure that more schools have BHTs, but it's never been a requirement before. So this policy will make it a requirement. Next slide, please. So section 3, suicide awareness, prevention, and education. This is the biggest section of the policy. This establishes requirements for specific actions schools must take to promote safe, equitable, and supportive environments that support the well-being of students and staff. So I'm just going to point out just a few of the pieces from this section. Next slide, please. The first is positive and equitable learning environments. So schools will be required to promote a positive school climate that supports the social and emotional development of all students and adults and fosters an equitable, safe, and supportive learning environment. This is focused on supporting Black, Latinx, and LGBTQ students by ensuring staff understand how racism, homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, and other prejudices intersect and could impact their ability to properly assess and support students. It connects to the CPS Equity Framework and Skyline Initiative, the CPS Addressing Bullying and Bias-Based Behavior, and the Comprehensive Non-Discrimination Policies, and instructs schools to implement restorative practices and follow appropriate protocol regarding sexual misconduct cases. So again, taking existing policies and initiatives and just bringing them all in one place. Next slide, please. There's also a parent caregiver engagement piece in this section, and this is requiring schools to provide learning opportunities for parents and guardians to increase their understanding of age-appropriate mental health behaviors and skills. This should include, but not be limited to, warning signs and risk factors of suicide and steps to take in the event that additional mental health support is needed or if a crisis occurs in the home. So we're doing what we can in school. We also want to equip parents to be able to handle these kinds of situations at home. Next slide. The LGBTQ plus support section requires schools to ensure that all school and district staff create safe and supportive environments for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, questioning, non-binary, and gender non-conforming students and staff by adhering to the procedures outlined in the CPS guidelines regarding the support of transgender and gender non-conforming individuals. This includes using the individual's affirmed name and or pronouns and updating official records as necessary and upon request by the individual, providing access for students and staff to the restrooms and locker rooms that correspond to their gender identity, and demonstrating support of LGBTQ students by having visible signs and symbols of support displayed around the building, things like out badges, inclusive curricula, things like that. So essentially, this is just taking existing guidelines and putting them into policy. Next slide, please. So those are the only sections that I'm going to really go into detail today, but other areas that are covered in this section of the policy are social emotional climate, student leadership. So we really want schools to engage students in their own mental health, crisis response preparedness, access to medical home and mental health services. And that section is really just telling schools to work with our office to make sure that students have health insurance, a medical home, and know where to access mental health services. There's also communication of support and resources, health education, employee wellness, and then a section that just addresses supporting diverse learners in this area. Next slide. Section 4 is methods of intervention and response to suicidal ideation, attempt, or death by suicide. This section provides guidance on responding to suicidal behavior in schools and outside of school hours. The district acknowledges that staff are not expected to be on call or accessible outside of school hours. However, we do know that on occasion, school staff will receive notification from a student that they are experiencing a mental health crisis. And so what this section says is, if that happens, staff must immediately contact the Student Safety Center to inform them of the situation. And then when possible, follow the steps outlined in the crisis manual. So the policy does not get very specific about all of these intervention and response steps, but that is all outlined in the crisis manual. And basically what we are saying is, if it's a Saturday and a teacher receives a text from a student or an email or sees something on social media, they should follow these steps to ensure that student gets the support that they need. We are not saying that teachers are expected to check their email on weekends or be on the lookout for anything, but just if they become aware of it, they should act upon it. And then the second point is that schools must follow the police notification guidelines outlined in the Student Code of Conduct. And when calling 911 in response to a mental health crisis or suicidal activity, staff should request a crisis intervention trained officer when possible. So we want to provide guidance regarding calling the police. We recognize that there are some situations where police must be called, but we want to take a harm reduction approach to ensure students in crisis receive support without negative repercussions. Next slide, please. Section 5 addresses student absences, grades, and disciplinary actions. And it essentially states that students are allowed to take up to 5 mental health days as required by state law. This is something that was just passed recently by the state of Illinois. And basically, it says that a mental health day is the same as any other sick day. They are considered valid causes for absence. They will not require a medical note. And basically what we are saying is if you know, just like adults, we need to take a mental health day, so do our students. This section also requires schools to accommodate students who are absent due to mental or behavioral health issues following the protocols of the home hospitalization program as needed. So if a student misses school because they are seeking mental health treatment or because they are taking these mental health days, we need to make sure that they get their homework assignments, they're allowed to make up tests, and that they're not penalized in any way. And then the last piece is that schools will be prohibited from implementing out-of-school suspension following a mental health crisis without proper due process as outlined in the CPS Student Code of Conduct. So again, that's something that exists in the Code of Conduct. We are just connecting it to this policy. Next slide. So the last section is training. And this essentially establishes 2 new trainings for staff. The first is an annual training that is about identifying the warning signs, risk factors, and protective factors of mental illness and suicidal behavior in youth. And so staff will be taught appropriate intervention, responses, and referral techniques. That's something that will go to all school-based and district staff. And then the second training is a specialized training for school-based social workers, psychologists, counselors, and nurses that will ensure that they are prepared to act as first responders when present in school during a mental health crisis or occurrence of suicidal activity. So the first training that's for all staff is very basic. Here are the warning signs and risk factors of depression and suicidal behavior. And here's what to do if you recognize this behavior in a student. That second specialized training is for the staff who will really be the ones delivering interventions to students in crisis. And then the last training is the supporting transgender, non-binary, and gender non-conforming students training. This is something that's already required. We're just putting it in this policy, again, to connect it to the mental health issue. Next slide, please. So that's really all of the content of the policy. That's really most of the meat of the policy, if you will. The next steps from here, the policy will be posted for public comment from mid-January to mid-February. Those dates might be slightly off, but it's basically the middle of the month to the middle of the next month. So anyone who wants to will have the opportunity to review the full policy draft and provide any feedback. And so the way that you can do that is if you go to cps.edu/about and you select the Chicago Board of Education. If you click on that, it will come up with a page that says proposed policies or something like that. And that's where you can read the policy and provide any feedback. Next slide. I think that's it for my slides. So I know that was a lot of me talking. I hope that was okay. I did get the note about slowing down, so I tried to slow down. So now I'm happy to answer any questions.
Awesome, Lauren. Thank you so much. Please, anyone, feel free if there are any questions. I know it's a lot of information, as she said, and it could take some time to process, but please feel free to unmute if there's any questions at this time.
A mí me gustaría hacer unas preguntas. Estoy tratando de abrir mi cámara. Mi nombre es Cristina Padilla.
Claro que sí, Cristina. ¿En qué le podemos ayudar?
A ver si, ok, ya la pude abrir. Bueno, pues a mí me pareció muy interesante la charla. Y para mí este tema de la salud mental es un tema de mucha preocupación. Porque personalmente he lidiado inclusive recientemente con jóvenes que necesitan ayuda urgente y no la tienen. Definitivamente para tener acceso en un momento de crisis, eso significa algo imposible. La primera barrera que está es que lo primero que dicen es llamar 911, ¿verdad? El joven cuando tiene una crisis ya dio muchas señas atrás, que si no fueron detectadas en el hogar, debieron haber sido detectadas en la escuela por la preparación que los profesores, los consejeros tienen. Entonces, no se da una ayuda hasta el exacto momento de la crisis, ¿no? Y creo que es una actitud de conducta de esta sociedad, no nada más para eso, para muchas cosas, ¿no? Y es muy triste porque cuando los jóvenes necesitan la ayuda ya están en el momento crisis, significa que ahora van a tener un tratamiento muy fuerte, incluyendo antipsicóticos y demás tipos de medicamentos. ¿Por qué esperar hasta ese momento? Esa es la pregunta. Sería mi pregunta. ¿Por qué un sistema de educación de un país tan fuerte como Estados Unidos, aquí en Chicago, no hace los cambios propios para que estos jóvenes no lleguen al momento de crisis? Deben ser identificados antes, pero esto sucede, en mi muy personal opinión, ignorantemente la digo porque no soy doctora, no soy enfermera, no soy nada, es porque no hay una educación. No nos enseñan ni siquiera a darnos cuenta cuando estamos en un momento de crisis por enojo. Estoy muy mal, me siento muy mal y no sé por qué. Tengo enojo, tengo tristeza, tengo desesperación, pero ¿por qué la tengo y qué me está pasando? Pero nadie me escucha, nadie sabe, me da vergüenza, es un tabú, ni nadie lo identifica. Y si alguien me pregunta con que yo diga que estoy bien, eso es suficiente. Y si digo que estoy mal, entonces también, pero no estoy mal. Pero ¿quién sabe las personas que son profesionales? Perdón que está entrando una llamada y me está cortando.
No
Espero
se
que ahorita
preocupe,
pase.
Cristina. Le voy a ser honesta. ¿Fue mucho? Déjelo, lo
Sí, está bien.
interpreto a inglés, si me pueden permitir
Sí,
unos momentos.
claro.
Okay, Lauren, so it was a lot, so I'm going to do my best to translate that for you. She's basically saying that her overall question is she feels that it's waiting until the last moment. From what it sounds, it's waiting until the last moment to where the student is already in a crisis, to where students get the help that they need. Sorry, I'm seeing a message from Myra. You can also turn on English interpretation. Oh, it's okay, Myra. Thank you. Yeah, so she said that she really feels that, in a personal opinion, that she feels like in the educational system and in a country that's such a strong country in education, she feels that this is waiting until the very last moment, until the students are already in crisis, to give them that help. From what she sees personally, it's not something that's sought early on when they're showing signs, and that she feels that in a place where staff and teachers should be very well trained, she's not seeing that. I hope if everyone agrees that I kind of got the gist of it, of what Cristina said. So básicamente le dije a Cristina, y me puede decir si estoy mal, que básicamente usted siente que es hasta el último momento, ¿verdad? Hasta que ya están en crisis los estudiantes donde reciben esa ayuda,
Sí,
¿verdad? Y siente
sí,
que
y, y no solo es hasta que ya están en crisis, pero cuando está el momento crítico, las personas que abordan la crisis tampoco están preparadas y inmediatamente los someten a una intervención médica muy fuerte de medicamentos, cuando el problema no, muchas veces no hacen una evaluación neurológica para saber que esto es físico, biológico, pero muchos de nuestros jóvenes no tienen esos problemas, tienen problemas psicobiológicos, emocionales, pero de la sociedad,
Ok, otra vez,
de lo que pasa en la sociedad, en sus hogares.
interpreto eso. So yeah, she says that not only that, she feels like there should be an evaluation done because she feels like it's something deeper than that, right? Something psychological going on with students, and there should be, you know, a deeper investigation on all of that. And then it gets to the point where it's like medication being given because they kind of look for it as a last resort, right? And they're giving, at that point, it's like now it's like strong medication being involved. Sorry, Lauren, that was a lot.
So, I can try to speak in English, but I don't know if I could.
No,
So
no,
that's
you're
why I
okay.
say
No
in
worries.
Spanish.
So Lauren, whenever you're ready.
Sure.
Mi última cosa es que, ¿por qué no tratar de, estamos hablando que deberían los niños de América tener el beneficio de que sus padres sean entrenados para educarlos? Yo soy dula de profesión y fui entrenada para poder ayudar a las madres, no en esta área obviamente, pero para cualquier cosa, hasta para ser barrendera, exigen un certificado, pero no exigen nada para decir cómo vamos a educar a un ser humano, cuáles los cuidados que necesita. No exige nada. Entonces, como los padres, nos vamos a preparar para educar a estos hijos que tenemos. El alimento, el sustento, todo es muy importante, pero la educación, no hay una educación. Y yo a veces digo algo que es muy fuerte personalmente también. ¿Eduqué a mis hijas? No, las cuidé, les di alimento, les di todo. No les di educación, no les enseñé a conocer su ser. Y eso solamente a través de una educación psicoemocional, psicosocial, psicológica.
She said her last note on this is that she feels that parents should also be kind of trained and involved and on how to educate their children on this, and that she feels that that's something that's being done. As a sad note, as her profession, she's a doula, and she says like for anything, in this life, we should be trained and certified on that. And she feels like that's not something parents have as of now.
Thank you. Thank you for all of that. Those are some really, really good thoughts and comments, and I really appreciate you voicing all of that. The way that we are approaching, and first of all, I also want to say that I agree with everything that you're saying. I think the way that as a society we view mental health, I think it's changing. It's getting better. We're talking about it more, but I think for too long we have let things get to that crisis point. Our goal with this policy is to not do that. So the way we have, and I know that me just talking about it does not really give you the full picture of what will be in this policy. We have the crisis response section. So we do need to make sure that school staff are prepared to respond to those situations, that they know what to do if a student expresses suicidal ideation in school, or if something, gets to that point. But the whole prevention and education section of the policy, the goal of that is for schools to do the groundwork to really try to avoid it getting to that point. So things like social emotional climate. The language in the policy is not very specific and it's brief. I will say that we are going to create an implementation guide and additional resources that will go much more into detail. So where the policy says schools must create positive social emotional climate, what does that mean? These other resources will tell you, here's how to do that. Here's how teachers can have check-in activities in their classrooms where they actually ask students, how are you doing today? And talk about mental health, whether it's through our actual health education curriculum, which will give students the skills to kind of take control of their own mental health, if that makes sense, like this, giving individuals the skills to recognize what they are experiencing, to talk about it, and to seek help when they need it. But we really are trying to build these environments in schools where students do feel safe and supported. And another example is with the LGBTQ support section. We know that something as simple as using an individual's affirmed name and pronouns can have a significant impact on their mental health. So we're really trying to lay out these steps that schools can take to create this environment of support. And also we do have something in there about parent training. We don't use the word training for parents, but we do say, hey, schools, you need to work with your parents to make sure that they do, know what resources are available, that they have the basic language to talk about mental health. And then we're also, outside of the policy, we really have been ramping up our mental health work in general. Within the Office of Student Health and Wellness, we are onboarding 2 mental health staff, hopefully in the next few months, a program manager and a specialist. So we're building our capacity to be able to support schools and the community and parents and caregivers. So I hope I addressed some of your concerns. I do also want to say, I know that a policy is not the perfect solution to all of these problems, but I think it's an important step in just saying, this is what we know needs to happen in schools, and then how can we all work together to make sure that it is actually happening.
Thank you, Lauren. And then, Cristina, espero que haya tocado un poco el tema de su pregunta. Es mucho, ¿verdad? Como dice, es mucho y creo que, como dijo Lauren, ese es un paso muy importante para tratar de avanzar, ¿verdad? Y tratar de mejorar el problema. Just kind of saying, I really hope that this kind of answered her question, or at least touched a little bit on the topic. It's a lot, and I think we're all, like Lauren said, it's a big step and it's an important step that we're taking to try to, touch the topic and address all these problems that are going on, and kind of focus right now on our students and on their well-being. Muchas gracias, Cristina, por su pregunta. Cristina, thank you so much for your question and for your comments. We have a couple more minutes, everyone. Please feel free to ask your questions or concerns. If you guys have any comments, that's what Lauren is here for today. And I'm happy to be that bridge so you guys are able to ask your questions and voice your concerns.
Yo soy Auri y soy una mamá de CPS, y mi preocupación es qué pasa con los niños que todavía no son adolescentes. Cuando, por ejemplo, sufren bullying en las escuelas o empiecen ya a sufrir la violencia de género. Tuve una experiencia yo misma que una niña de 8 añitos que vio su periodo por primera vez, esta niña todavía no estaba educada de lo que iba a pasar. En los niños normalmente de 9, 10 años, que ya uno les empieza a decir, pero esto fue a temprana edad. Yo pienso que este es una preocupación para los niños menores de edad, como por ejemplo ya en la primaria. La educación debería de ser dada para los padres también, porque hay padres que tenemos temor de decir a nuestros hijos, mira, más a las niñas, también los varones, pero a las niñas es más importante hablarles sobre los cambios de sus cuerpos, sobre el consentimiento de sus cuerpos. Yo lamentablemente no aprendí eso durante mi niñez, a pesar de que mis papás eran personas que sabían mucho sobre educación sexual de género, porque ellos trabajan en un centro de salud a apoyo a la comunidad. Y ellos pues atienden muchas personas, muchos casos atendían de violaciones, de traumas, pero ellos por temor de no lastimarnos cuando estábamos chiquitas, solo somos 2 niñas en la casa, 2 hermanas, y pues por temor nunca nos hablaron de sexo, nunca nos hablaron de qué nos iba a pasar conforme íbamos creciendo nuestra transformación de nuestros cuerpos. Y eso es lo que me preocupa en estos tiempos, porque me enfoco a hablar mucho con las madres de las escuelas y les pregunto si han hablado ellos con sus niñas, sus niños sobre educación sexual, y no, por eso empieza la violencia desde chiquititos, porque cuando los niños no saben qué le pasa a la otra niña, se burlan de ella, porque así fue en nuestro caso, en nosotros. Se burlaron, se rieron, y eso no debe de ser. Por eso la educación a temprana edad para mí sería eficaz, porque es algo que cambia el futuro de los jóvenes. Si desde pequeños son educados, ellos en lugar de burlarse de esa persona, lo ayudan. Mi niña, cuando empezó a ir a la escuela de prekinder, yo le empecé a hablar. Le dije, si un niño te molesta o te toca y tú no quieres, dile que no quieres, que no estás de acuerdo que te esté tocando. Y la fui educando poco a poco porque no quería que pasara lo que yo pasé. Y muy cierto, mi niña a temprana edad vio su periodo muy chiquita, de 7 años, más chiquita que yo todavía de 8 años, pero esta niña de 7 años. Y gracias a Dios que empecé a hablarle a temprana edad y no pasó lo mismo que a mí me pasó. Por eso yo siempre, donde quiera que hablo, digo, también los niños chiquititos necesitan, los padres necesitan ser entrenados para hablar con sus hijos, no hasta que ya sean mayores de edad. Para mí, mayores de edad, digo 12, 13 años, porque uno ya razona, pero ni aún así, siempre se burla de la otra persona cuando está pasando cosas y eso no debería de ser. Deberíamos de ayudarnos a nuestros jóvenes, a nuestros niños chiquitos para que se vaya calmando la violencia, porque los traumas ya cuando son adolescentes son muy fuertes. Como estaba diciendo a la persona que estaba hablando, hasta uno puede llamar a la autoridad, claro, pero ya van a ser un proceso muy fuerte, un tratamiento muy severo. En lugar de ayudar, a veces se quedan más traumados porque no hay cómo los podemos pues sacar todo ese trauma de su cabeza. Es muy difícil sanar esas heridas que ellos han pasado. y muchos de nuestros jóvenes, más los latinos, hemos sido golpeados por los traumas bien fuertes. Entonces, pues yo pienso que sería bien empezar desde chiquitos, desde en casa, o nuestros padres o nosotros que estamos creando a nuestros hijos deberíamos de ser orientados para que esto no pase.
Gracias, señora. Otra vez, un poquito de paciencia mientras interpreto eso en inglés, por favor. Antes de que continuemos, por favor, si están haciendo, denme pausitas, denme pausitas nada más para poder...
Disculpas.
Yes, Shauna, there will be a copy of the recording. We're going to post it on YouTube, and then the slides I think are also going to be available so everyone can check out at their own pace. Sí, denme pausas, por favor, nomás para poderle comunicar a Lauren qué es lo que está pasando. So Lauren, again, that was a lot. It's a question, a comment, and just some kind of background, right? Her overall question is, what is kind of the process that looks like for our younger kids who are not adolescents yet, right? When they're kind of not at that age where she believes that they're being taught more about like reproductive health and their own bodies. She's saying that this spikes a lot of bullying. Her background here was that she knew of a girl, an 8-year-old girl, who got her menstrual for the first time and was being bullied because of it, since she believes that students weren't well taught on the subject yet. And her overall question is kind of what is the process there? She really believes that students should be taught about reproductive health and kind of going hand in hand with bullying and kind of supporting each other. And that's her overall concern, that she feels that we're not starting young enough with the communication of reproductive health. And she thinks that it's really important for them to be aware to avoid that bullying, to avoid the future trauma of our students.
That's a great question. Thank you so much. I don't know that I have a specific answer for you, because I think you're touching on a lot of existing policies and other kind of programs. So, because what you're saying is touching on our sexual health education policy and the sexual health curriculum, which, you know, starts in pre-K. So students are required to receive age and developmentally appropriate sexual health and reproductive health curriculum starting in pre-K. And then also touching on the anti-bullying policy and all the work around anti-bullying. So I am not personally specifically familiar with the sexual health curriculum to know if 8 years old, I'm guessing that's 3rd or 4th grade. So I just don't know what is being taught at those grade levels. But I think this is a really good example of how all of this work does come together and how all of this connects. So I don't know if that's a really good answer for you, unfortunately, but I definitely understand where you're coming from. And I think if there's a question about the reproductive health education piece, you know, you can email our sexual health team if you have any questions about that. So if that's helpful, I can put that email in the chat box. I feel like that's sort of a non-answer, but it's because all of these pieces really are so intertwined.
Yes, no, Lauren, I think that was great. And I was going to ask if I could just kind of intervene there a little bit and say that we are always here to support. Ask the Experts kind of handles, you know, we try to be that bridge for a lot of different questions and a lot of different topics. And you all can always reach out to us in that RSVP. There's always an email where you can reach out. And then I can also leave my email in the chat. I can always be that bridge for you all. If there's any questions with any departments within CPS, we can find those resources. Oh, yes. Sorry, Lauren.
Sí, perdón que me atreví a decir esto, porque desde que tengo niños en la primaria y ahorita ya tengo en la secundaria, y todo el tiempo he estado involucrado en las escuelas de mis hijos, pero nunca nosotros los padres nos hablaron sobre cómo educar a nuestros hijos. Por eso hablo así con el corazón en la mano,
Claro.
que se necesita, porque a lo mejor sí en otras escuelas se están implementando, pero en otras escuelas no. Y esa es lo que nosotros los padres queremos, que sea implementada en todas las escuelas, no importando el código postal.
Claro.
Porque a lo mejor en otras escuelas, pero en nuestras escuelas está muy escaso de información hacia los padres y hacia los niños, porque yo tengo mucha comunicación con los míos y la educación que se les está dando no es como yo quisiera, pues, que se dé. Entonces, por eso me atrevo a decir esto y a recalcarlo todavía, porque todavía no se está dando en todas las escuelas y eso es lo que necesitamos en las escuelas para calmar la violencia. Por eso nosotros sí nos preocupa. Nosotros los padres que estamos al pendiente de nuestros hijos, nos preocupa eso sobre la violencia.
Okay. She touched the topic of, claro que sí, señora Ari. She said that she apologizes for the boldness of asking the question, but she kind of wants to reiterate, right? So she's saying kind of that she feels that the lack of communication to parents on how to educate their children is lacking personally, and that she thinks that this is something that should be brought up and involved in all schools and not just specific in specific schools, right? And as of now, personally, she has children of many ages, right? And that the fact that she communicates very well with them. And from what she's seen, like she doesn't feel that she's getting that communication. I just want to very quickly say that I'm going to plug myself in right now very quickly. So I'm going to reiterate, my name's Sarai. I'm Parent University Coordinator of Network 4. But like I said, feel free to use us as that bridge, right? Especially right now that we're touching the subject of parent education. We are here for parents. Parent University is centralized around providing classes, resources, and just overall help to parents. We want to make sure, we know that education is also very important at home and for the whole family. So please, I will leave my email in the chat. If there's any resources that you all need, if there's any classes that you all need, please feel free to reach out because we are here to help. Lauren right now is touching a lot on what we're doing right now for our students to make sure that our students are okay and their well-being is good, and that we make sure to provide those resources for them. And I want to reiterate the fact that I am here also to help you all. We are very centralized on parents and making sure that they have everything they need so that the whole family is okay and that the whole family succeeds. So once again, I will leave my email in the chat. Please feel free to reach out, send me an email. If I respond, I also have a phone number to give you all, and we'll make sure that we are able to provide those resources. And then Ari, you said that you're very involved with parents. Share the information, share the contact, and we'll make sure that we are able to bring those resources for you all. Sí está en el canal de español, ¿verdad? Puedes, perfecto. Okay, so yeah, I hope everyone got that information. I will leave it in the chat. But yes, I know this kind of goes past, Lauren, what we're talking about here for today's session, but I'm glad these topics are being brought up because we're here to help everyone. We know that this is a community effort to make sure that our students are okay and that they're doing good. So we're here to support. Please do never feel alone when it comes to these things or anything. We're here to help. Okay, I will leave my email in the chat now. Everyone, please feel free to reach out. And then once again, I said I can also give a phone number if you guys feel more comfortable speaking over the phone.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is there any specific curriculum or questions?
I'm sorry?
No. This is Susan. Is there any specific questions for mental illness prevention, awareness, and the education for parents and resources if the kids have disabilities?
For disabilities.
many parents may not know that mental illness is considered a disability, and we want to make sure that the resources for mental health and awareness are focused for everyone, and kids with disabilities, with sometimes regardless of age, don't get the same focus. So, is there specific things that we can do, or that you can do to educate the parents and let them know what resources are available?
Yeah, so regarding the mental health policy, we do have a section in there that addresses supporting diverse learner students. It doesn't really go into detail. It's essentially, I don't remember exactly what the language says, but it's essentially working with the diverse learner staff and following all the appropriate protocols to make sure that diverse learner students are getting the supports that they need. But going back to parent specific resources, right now I don't know if there is something that exists, because again, what we're doing with this policy is we're really bringing together a lot of things that already exist elsewhere. But when we put together that implementation guide and those resources, I think that's something that we can keep in mind is, how to support students with disabilities and what that looks like for mental health. So I don't know if there's anything right now, but if not, there is definitely something that we can work on. And I see a question in the chat about the mental health curriculum. Right now, we don't have a specific standalone mental health curriculum. It's folded into the health education curriculum.
Okay, everyone, we're past our time. I really, just to be coordinated with everyone's time, I really appreciate you all being here today and asking your questions. I know there's more questions left, and Lauren, let me know if you're willing to answer one last question. Perfect. Rosa, please feel free to ask your question.
Buenas tardes. Yo mi pregunta es como en mi caso personal con mi hija, que tiene emocionalmente un almacenamiento de un caso, pero ahorita en nuestra situación, yo ahorita no trabajo, y ¿cómo podemos hacer que ella necesita psicológicamente ayuda, pero no tenemos el dinero necesario para pagar su psicólogo? ¿Qué se hace en ese caso?
Claro, Rosa. Muchas gracias por hacer su pregunta. Lauren, the question here is, in her personal case, she's asking the question of her daughter needs some help, some mental help, and she was asking how is it that she can do it if she doesn't have the income to take her daughter to a psychiatrist? Is there any resources available?
That's another great question. So what I would say that you should do, I'm going to put this phone number in the chat box. This is our Healthy CPS Hotline. 54. So if you call that number, one of our coordinators can either help you enroll in health insurance if you don't have health insurance, or if your daughter needs health insurance, whether it's Medicaid or something else. So they can help you get started with that. And then they can also help you find resources in your community where your daughter can get the help that she needs. And then I would also say that you know, if you feel comfortable, talk to the principal or talk to the school nurse, or if you know who the school counselor is, if there's someone at the school who can help your daughter get the support that she needs. And that's a big part of why we are requiring that every school has a behavioral health team. So these are the people at the school who can work with students to make sure that they get the support that they need. But I would definitely call that phone number to get connected to someone in your community.
Perfect, Lauren. Thank you so much, and for providing that phone number. If everyone wants to take a quick screenshot of that phone number, just so we have it handy, just in case, never know when it might be needed. Once again, for time reasons, I want to thank everyone for being here with us today. This is a subject that there will never be enough time in the world to go over. So I appreciate you all taking the time to be here and kind of taking that first step, that first dip in the water on this topic, and wanting to learn more about it and be that bridge for other parents, because I know some of us are here representing other parents as well. So I want to thank you all. Lauren, thank you so much for providing all of this information. We really appreciate it, and for the resources that were given. Please, everyone, feel free to reach out. I know we're all looking out for our kiddos, but please remember to look out for yourselves as well. And if you guys need anything, please feel free to reach out. We're always here to support. Thank you for joining us on another session of Face to Face, and we will be here to answer your questions and to be that bridge for you all. So I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of the day. Lauren, before we go, one pinpointed fact that you want parents to go home with today?
Oh, wow. I don't know if this is really a fact, but I think what I would say is we recognize that this work is a huge collaborative effort, and we really do want to hear from you, and we want to do everything that we can to ensure that your voices are heard. And we also, I do just want to say that this policy is one small piece in a much bigger body of work, but we really are all coming together to improve the situation around mental health in our schools.
Thank you, Lauren. Perfectly said. We're here to support everyone. Once again, thank you for being here, Lauren. Thank you so much for this information. And I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day. And I hope everyone joins us for the next face-to-face. Have a nice night, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.